Nick Saban, hanging it up, retiring as the head coach of Alabama. There are a million different directions we can go with this one. I think we have to start with Nick Saban and Ohio State. His history with Ohio State. 2 games that Ohio State fans probably not going to want to think about. 1 game that Ohio State fans consider one of their very favorite games probably to think about over the last few years. Tony, which one do you want to start with? Do you want to do this sequentially? Do we want to do this in terms of favorite Ohio State memories to least favorite? Do we want to get the bad one out of the way first? One of the bad ones out of the way first? Which one do you want to do first?
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and get the bad one out of the way first. And I'm still not totally unconvinced that if Nick Saban and Michigan State do not win that game in 1998, he is not back in 1999. That then allows him to get the LSU job. Because I think he finished with like 7-6 in '98, something like that, and obviously that 6-6. Yeah, so there you go. So that was a very big win, and it hadn't been a super successful couple of years for Saban there, but they got that win, and he turned it into that guy cashed that win in. He's cashed in. That's like not unlike Mel Tucker cashing in like one little thing into a big payday. Nick Saban turned that win into like 7 car dealerships, which is pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. You go back and you think head coach of Toledo for 1 year. I mean, Nick Saban coaching at Toledo and Urban Meyer coaching at Bowling Green. It's like, boy, those are some big names in Northwest Ohio. And then, goes from Toledo to the Cleveland Browns, to Michigan State, to LSU, to the Miami Dolphins, and then Alabama. And undoubtedly going to be remembered as one of, if not the greatest coaches in college football history. But Kevin, he did lose the first night game in college football playoff history in the 2014 season. I can't. Were you there? Were you at that game? Okay. What? Go ahead and after Tony brought the mood down, why don't you bring everyone back up with the 2015 Sugar Bowl?
Thank you. I'm glad I'm able to follow up after Tony, who is known internally as Buzz Killington. The 2014 game was something. Alabama was the 1, Ohio State was the 4. Obviously, as we're reliving all these good memories, Ohio State down to its 3rd quarterback with Cardale Jones. Goes into Indy and beats Wisconsin 59-0, goes to the Sugar Bowl to take on heavily favored Alabama. It was supposed to be a wipeout, and even as the game kind of started, Ohio State was moving the ball and having to settle for 3, and we know that's never going to be good. And then the Buckeyes poured it on. Zeke Elliott had some sort of run through the South, and then for whatever reason, Urban got greedy and tried to go deep late to try and drive the dagger right through their heart, did not connect there. Alabama scores. And then Alabama has the ball once again with a shot to win at the end of the game. Tyvis Powell, everybody's favorite, steps in, makes the play, and then starts running. And everybody in scarlet and gray in the Superdome is yelling, "Just go down already." They do. Celebration ensues, and Ohio State goes on to win the first college football playoff. And what I will remember most out of that game is that some way, somehow, Lane Kiffin talked Nick Saban into stop running Derrick Henry for whatever reason, and that was a big focal point as Derrick Henry was really problematic.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin. You always think of Lane Kiffin throwing his play sheet in the air in celebration for when they score a touchdown. I think Ohio State's defensive coaching staff was throwing their play sheets in the air in celebration as they forgot they had Derrick Henry and thought, Jake Coker, that's the money. That's how this game's going to get won. Interesting that Lane Kiffin is now one of those names that you're seeing on the lists in terms of who's going to replace Nick Saban at Alabama. I guess let's take a quick run. Everyone just throw out your name. Who is it going to be? I am going to say I think Dan Lanning from Oregon might be the guy I think is the most likely to end up there, but I have seen pretty good arguments for several other names as well.
Buzz,
go ahead.
No, I'm giving it to you, Buzz.
Okay, Buzz. I'm with you, Dan Lanning or Hugh Freeze, one of those two. We'll see. I'm torn. I'm torn.
I'm not sure what part of that is funniest.
All of it.
Dan Lanning is the choice there, in my opinion. And real quick, back to when I was a civilian, way back when I worked, one of my coworkers, his wife was the niece of Nick Saban, and when he signed like his new deal with LSU, and he was already like the highest paid college football coach, and I was just looking at it now, his new deal paid him like $1.6 million a year back in like 2001, 2002. So 20 years later, and you could have paid him $20 million a year at Alabama, and he still would have been a bargain.
As for my replacement, obviously, I think Lanning is the betting favorite right now. I think that Lane Kiffin has kind of been waiting in a holding pattern for that job to open up. Will he get the opportunity? I also know that Dabo Swinney had been rumored to be the heir apparent until Clemson started to go a little downhill, and Dabo does not have visions of NIL and things of that in his dreams. So I don't think that he is the guy. I go round and round, but I think Lane Kiffin is the guy that makes sense to me. 2014 notwithstanding.
It would be entertaining.
Yeah, it would definitely be entertaining. Whoever it is, and I don't think they're going to go for Kiffin. I think Kiffin has not quite established himself as, let's just say, a grown-up for long enough that it's worth, that he's probably going to be someone who's in there. But I think whoever that is, you don't ever want to be the guy after the guy, right? That feels like that never works out.
For $7 million a year, does it matter? For like, you're going to sign a 4 or 5 year deal. So this is going to be $25 to $40 million. I'll be the guy after the guy. I'll be the guy after Nick Saban for that. And when I get fired after 4 years, I'll end up going back to, I don't know, Syracuse and rebuilding from there, or just, do TV or whatever else. Like, you can do whatever you want after one contract at Alabama.
I want to read the super chat because I want to read it as is. As somebody took it down. Speedman 606. Sorry, not sorry. You guys ate boring and sick. Booey. Well, thank you for your $2, Speedman. Type so good.
New rule on super chats: they need to be at least $5 and in English. All right, next up, let's talk about the potential recruiting impact of Nick Saban not being the head coach of Alabama. All right, super chat, quick for Treasure Tour. This is Buckeye Huddle for you, Kevin. You'll always be my brother. I always support you. Always have, and will continue to. So please, as McChicken, where he will do the same to put your money where your mouth is. So there we go. So thank you.
Dueling super chats. I like
it. There we go. All right. So I do want to talk a little bit about the recruiting impact for Nick Saban leaving Alabama, because you've already seen there was already one 5-star receiver who was committed to Alabama, didn't sign in December, and then is essentially reopening his commitment, reopening his recruitment before he signs in February. Didn't sound like that was one where Ohio State might get involved, but boy, Alabama has a lot of talented players, and a lot of talented players that Ohio State has been trying to recruit over the years. Caleb Downs being probably the one that is sort of first and foremost, probably in a lot of people's minds, and in a position where Ohio State might not mind having another talented 5-star type player. How big of, this is when you lose your head coach, the transfer portal opens up for 30 days. Anyone who is at Alabama can jump back in the portal. Yes, the transfer portal window closed as soon as Nick Saban said bye. That portal opens up again for 30 days. Is there anyone, Kevin, that you think, other than Caleb Downs, who I think is sort of the obvious one, is there anyone that Ohio State has been involved with in the past in terms of high school recruiting that, if that person went in the portal, you think that would be sort of at the top of Ohio State's list?
What is Caleb Downs? Oh, you told me not Caleb Downs. Yes, most of the roster, to be quite honest, but I think that Keon Keeley is a name that makes sense. I think you could sit there and look maybe on the offensive line. I mean, I don't know. I mean, J.C. Latham had kind of a rough season. So did Seth McLaughlin. If we're really looking at things, if you believe the PFF numbers, I mean, Ohio State and Alabama recruit against each other all the time. So there's not going to be a shortage of guys. So I think really what it comes down to is you look at what Ohio State's needs are, and then you cross-reference it against what Alabama has, and that's kind of where you go. So we know, obviously, offensive line, they probably would love to get a tackle, so you look at the tackles for Alabama and see what's going on there. While I don't think that Caleb Downs on the surface is like addresses the greatest need Ohio State has, he's Caleb Downs. He's pretty damn special. You've tried to figure that one out. I've not had a chance to really go through Alabama's roster because the last time I watched Alabama, they were just I can't even come up with the word. They were just staggering around the field against the team up north and never really got to see any offensive player do anything of consequence in that game. So you can be sure that Mark Pantoni and the staff at Ohio State is certainly creating a wish list and then seeing who takes advantage of the 30-day portal entry. I still don't necessarily have clarifications of once that happens, if you have to actually file NC2A paperwork to go into the portal, how that system works. I assume it works under the normal mechanism of you have to actually go to the effort to enter the portal. But there are probably a lot of high school coaches out there of all the Alabama kids who are getting phone calls of, so is your kid happy down there? And just, however you can keep it just one level away from direct contact.
Yeah, if you look up and down their recruiting classes, you just see a bunch of tackles that Ohio State missed on, like even like Olas Alinen is a freshman this year. Caden Proctor, another one, and J.C. Latham was already mentioned. So there are guys that Ohio State fans would be familiar with, and obviously the Ohio State staff would be familiar with as well. I mean, shoot, even a guy like Ty Lockwood at tight end who used to be committed to Ohio State was a freshman this year. Richard Young, the running back that Ohio State was in on for a long time, was a freshman this year for Alabama. Somebody asked if Keon Keeley played. I do not see any stats for him this year, so I'm going to assume that's a no. But, that's a guy right there that they could get involved with. And frankly, given the way Ohio State is going to lose defensive ends after this year, assuming they get JT Tuimoloau back, and again, when we say this year, we mean 2024, there could be some opportunities for some playing time in 2025 and frankly even this coming year as they try to get ready for what is to come. So this is going to be I was looking at on Twitter to what kind of tweet, what kind of GIF should I throw out there? Should it be one of those like wedding dress rushes as the doors open? People just, women are beating each other trying to get to the dresses, or Black Friday type of thing. I think that's what you're going to see. Like if Tim Beckman was still at Illinois, he would be, he'd have a stand set up across the street from the stadium with, the doctor is in, come see me type of thing. Would be trying to talk to anybody he could, man on the street stuff. And, I think you're going to see a lot of coaches in terms of maybe third uncles, street agents, things like that. But any more texts and DMs and say, hey, are you happy? How are things? What are you thinking? Or you're talking to parents, hey, how's the coaches? You're talking to high school coaches, confidants. Every single player on that roster that is any good, and 80% of the ones who aren't, are going to have people reaching out about them.
Well, and I've seen people saying it's still Alabama. They're going to hang on to all their people. You got to remember where we are in the college football calendar. You can't have other people going into the portal until April. Everyone else's people are already in the portal or already, are stuck on their rosters for several more months. Everyone has holes to fill. Ohio State is not the only team with holes to fill. And players from Alabama give you an opportunity to upgrade your roster pretty much every program, pretty much every position group. So you've got the market is now potentially open, and I think people are able to, slide through the side door to get to people, whether that's contacting parents or contacting third uncles or contacting high school coaches. You're going to have the Tim Beckmans and the modern, better versions of Tim Beckman's doing that. And this is, do you remember Hodor from Game of Thrones, where he's got to just stand there and hold back this horde of people trying to go through the door? That feels like that's going to be Alabama's personnel people, because Georgia would be able to improve their roster with some of the guys from Alabama. Ohio State would be able to improve their roster with some of the guys from Alabama. Everyone would be able to improve their roster with some of the guys from Alabama. You got to figure, if everyone is going to make an offer for your guys, not that ever happens, but if everyone is going to make an offer for your guys, you can't match everyone's best offer from for 40 different players at the same time when you're also trying to hire a new coach. I think you're going to see some talent matriculating in and out of Tuscaloosa over the next 4 to 6 months. Super chat?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, especially when you're talking about guys that may have 1 or 2 years of eligibility left, I think the assumption is that Alabama isn't going to lose its brain and hire a Shula or Mike Price and go through that rigmarole again.
Rich Rod.
There certainly could be a year or two of transition that happens. And if you only have a year or two of eligibility left and other schools are out there and kind of matching the dollar figures, and 2 or 3 of these schools that are looking at you are in one of the Power 2 conferences, because let's be honest, it's the Big Ten and it's the SEC. I don't think that there's really a lot holding you back. You could sit there and say, yeah, it's Bama. Well, that's all well and good. Ohio State, Georgia, hell, Iowa. I mean, places have helmets and shoulder pads and scholarships and breakfast buffets and all of that, just like Alabama does. I mean, maybe Clemson's the only place that has slides, but they're in the ACC. So I think we are going to see some matriculation. But then what we'll see wave 2. And let's say hypothetically, Alabama goes and hires Dan Lanning from Alabama or from Oregon, and then we get to the spring portal. Then there'll be a mass exodus potentially out of Oregon, not only of players trying to follow their coach to Alabama, but then the players too that are like, well, we just lost our head coach, so we're going to have a lot to talk about here. We may have seen a shortening of the portal windows, but this late coaching change will create more ripples, and there will be players in the portal for the foreseeable future.
Well, and I'll just say, people talking about Alabama will keep their players. They've already had 20 players transfer since the end of the regular season. So players are leaving while Nick Saban is there. That's just the way of the world, as Tom said.
And you're also, I think, going to see, you have for years seen the sort of, as Kevin said, ripple effect where school A hires school B's coach, and then they, maybe you have players follow that coach. Well, school B's got to hire a coach, and if they're hiring a sitting coach, then school C gets involved. And you kind of have this ripple effect down the line where, at some point, maybe, if it is Dan Lanning, maybe Phil Knight can keep most of those Oregon guys at Oregon. Maybe. Or maybe they want to follow Dan Lanning from Oregon to Alabama. That means Brian Hartline might get a second crack at Jeremiah McClellan if Dan Lanning leaves Oregon, and then Oregon potentially has their whole roster opened up to potentially the portal. So this is, I don't think this is necessarily the way that the powers that be around college football wanted this to be, or were aiming for this to be, but it's the way it is. So that is something that is going to be a big story to watch, sort of the ripple effects from this moving down the line of college football, wherever door number 1 is that they hire their coach from, and then door number 2 and door number 3 that follow. Super chat from Fort Wayne Buckeye. Odds Saban joins game day next year. I don't know where he's going to go. Wherever he's going to go, he is immediately going to be probably the single best former coach on TV. If you ever watch Nick Saban press conferences, or my real favorites are the Nick Saban play of the week, where he's just sort of diagramming something on the TV, and it's just very casual. And at the end of it, you're like, oh, I understood everything he said. And like, he explained it so well, and it's so personable. He's got such a great personality that you never really saw. but man, I don't know if he's going to end up on Big Noon or Game Day, but man, oh man, wherever he is, that is going to be the show to watch.
I think it would be ESPN if he does any television, and here's why. His familiarity with the SEC deal is on ESPN, ABC. Fox has no piece of the SEC deal. While that doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't talk about the Big Ten and whatever other conferences, it just makes too much sense. I think it is a way to sunset Lee Corso a little bit. You have Nick Saban, for Pete's sake. I think that really rounds out the roster. Maybe find a way to lock Dez in the equipment closet and go on and profit.
Who says
Tony? No? Tony, you want to say anything? You want to say literally anything?
Well, I think let's find out exactly why this was such a quick retirement. Because as people have reported, like he was interviewing coaches yesterday and then suddenly kind of decides, you know what, I'm done. So maybe he just wants a break from all of it right now, and maybe it's not such a quick turnaround, but he is great on television. He's great when he's doing like bowl game studio shows and things like that where, you know, they're already out or whatever, and he's the halftime or the pregame. Like he's good with that. He's not unlike his commercials with Dion. You know, that's kind of just how he is. It's very, very surprising based on the gruffness of what used to be Nick Saban, but he's kind of softened the last couple of years, and that's probably, guys, why they have not won any national championships of late.
Do you guys have a favorite Nick Saban press conference moment? And we're going to keep it PG, so you may have to sort of tap dance around it, because a lot of the great Nick Saban press conference moments are not necessarily PG. I have three. I tweeted about it on Wednesday night after the news broke. But do either of you have a favorite Nick Saban press conference or media appearance kind of rant or quote or anything like that?
Now, it might have been a coach's clinic thing or a booster thing where he's talking about Miss Terry, his wife, about how like he stole her from some guy and who now like owns a gas station or something. And, you know, he drove her by there a few years back and like, wow, look, you could have had a gas station, something to that effect. And then she had some sort of retort. I don't remember what it was. I just know it was hilarious.
He's driving, you know, sees a guy she used to date in high school or something, and he's working at the gas station in because they're both from West Virginia, and he's working at the gas station, and you know, managing the gas station, whatever small West Virginia town. And you know, Nick says, "Boy, can you imagine if you'd married him? You'd be living here, married to someone who runs a gas station." She goes, "Hell, if I'd married him, he'd be the head coach of Alabama." So, yeah, that's a Miss Terry story. There was a great Miss Terry story where, you know, Nick is talking about, you know, being responsible with your relations with others, and, you know, don't get involved with someone who has more to, you know, unless they have as much or more to lose than you do, and there's a great punchline to that story. I'll let you figure that one out on your own.
Don't Google it.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have a favorite Nick Saban? Because I have three that I'll go through in a minute, but
I do. My favorite one I can't repeat right now, so I'll just take any reference to rat poison, to be quite honest, because I just think all of that is funny, especially when he has a bottle of Coca-Cola in front of him too. And there's probably got to be some ad exec that's like, "Oh, that's not the image that we're going for right now." But yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys have heard my favorite story, and I just sent it to you in the private chat.
I'm gonna check that. Yeah, that's the one. So there are three that I really love. Though I tweeted on Wednesday night, I tweeted out a clip. He's doing his radio show, and coaches, when they do the radio show, you know, I think you've found over the years that it used to be everyone just took calls from the audience, and then they sort of got to the point where they didn't want to take calls anymore because they would get, you know, if you remember the Dabo Sweeney radio show from earlier this year, there was an incident on there. They don't necessarily want to do that, so they found ways around it. There was a caller named Pee Wee into Nick Saban's radio show. This is a few years back, and Pee Wee would rant and rave about how they were doing everything wrong. And a few weeks later, Pee Wee called again, and Saban says, "Oh, Pee Wee, I'm so glad to hear from you. We have been having so much trouble protecting, even when they're rushing four. I'm hoping you can provide some guidance here to help us get through this rough patch." And it was just like, man, that is a guy who understands how the game is played and understands how it works. So that was a good one. If you just Google Nick Saban and Tin Horn, that's one of the great rants of all time. They were playing. It was like one of the, it was the SEC SoCon Challenge Week, midweek press conference. And, it was sort of like, well, obviously you're going to obliterate whoever you're going to play. And he went off on this long rant about, I think it was the Citadel. It might have been Georgia Southern. I mean, this is probably like 10 years ago, a team that had just run all over them in the first half of a game. So if you Google Nick Saban and Tin Horn, you will find that one. And the other one is not Nick Saban at the podium, but it was Jordan Battle, speaking of former Ohio State commits who ended up playing for Alabama. A reporter asked him, do you have any favorite sayings from Coach Saban, that he uses to motivate you or something like that? I'm just going to say, if you just Google Jordan Battle, Nick Saban, and D's, you'll find it. You've kind of heard the punchline already there. The best part of that video is he cites a couple of examples, and then on the second one, you hear what I can only assume is a sports information director in the back of the room just kind of yelping, "No!" And boy, it is one of the great moments of this century of sports press conferences. Josh Ingalls, thank you for the super chat. Always appreciate your support.
But that's his request.
Yes, Josh says, "I'm used to you guys at 1.5 times speed. Can you speak faster, please? I am doing my very best. If I drink coffee at this hour, I'll stay up. So that is not an option." So Mega Slow says, "I want to know what Phyllis from the Feinbaum Show feels about this." Boy, the Feinbaum Show tomorrow is going to be an all-timer.